Welcome back to the Andrew Ramon Show. In this episode, we discuss why every person has the potential to become a con artist and a scammer, and we find out how much money it would take to bribe someone in order for them to lie. Let's get into it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back. I hope you had a great weekend. Before we get into today's episode, make sure to hit subscribe, share this with a friend. We've begun to post almost daily now on social media, both TikTok and Instagram, so make sure to follow us there. Very interestingly, I got some news to share with you. It's some old news, but it really sets the tone. At the 1919 World Series, 8 Chicago White Sox baseball players intentionally lost against the Cincinnati Reds in exchange for a gambling bribe of $100,000, nearly $1.5 million today. People obviously began to grow suspicious when the White Sox athletes, are very talented, they had made it to the World Series after all, started to play badly in the best-of-9 championship series. A grand jury started to actually investigate the scandalous allegations when the crook players, which they dubbed them the Black Sox, right? Because the White Sox, but the Black Sox, for their kind of shady sports conduct, were actually indicted on 9 accounts of conspiracy. And this is one of the pitchers, Eddie. This is what he said. He said, quote, "I don't know why I did it. I needed the money. I had a wife and kids." And what's so mysterious about this story, though, is that the court's records documenting their confessions mysteriously vanished, which ended up acquitting the Black Sox athletes of all the charges with nothing major than a permanent ban from playing Major League Baseball. That's crazy. I mean, would you do that by chance? Because a lot of us just like see these stories and they captivate us, right? I mean, stories of scam artists captivate all audiences on whether it be streaming shows, whether it's Inventing Anna or Tinder Swindler, insane. Because what's interesting, though, is at the base of every scam is deception. And a lot of us get so enthralled with the story because we say, I mean, how can someone actually do this? How could someone actually get away with it for such a long time? What's interesting, at least for me, is I don't believe that people usually dream of becoming a professional liar or a scam artist when they're a child. Yet so many do, even to the point of becoming infamous. And the scariest thing about this is that we all actually have the potential of becoming con artists and scammers. You're like, nah, are you serious? Yeah, hate to break it to you. We all do. I mean, at the base of every deception, which is what a con artist will ultimately do, are lies. And what's interesting is that a study conducted by the University of Wisconsin examined 116,000 lies told by 632 participants over about a period of 3 months, and about 75% of the respondents didn't actually lie very much. Just about 0 to 2 lies per day. Pause. 2 lies per day? Why you be lying 2 lies a day? I mean, is this normal? Like, am I just like, do I just get tripped up over this? Like, people actually lie that like 2 lies per day? And this is what they say, that most lies are inconsequential, like little white lies saying, "Oh my gosh, I love this gift," even though you really don't like it. Or you're like, yeah, sure, I'd love to go eat at that place. But what's interestingly is that a small group, about 6% of them, had similarly low levels of lying on average, but had days in which they lied much more frequently. Okay, pause. About 75% maybe lied about twice a day. That can't be right, homie. Like, am I crazy to think that lying 2 times a day is still probably a little too much lying? Or I like the last part of the survey. They said that they had days in which they lied more frequently. Because it's just one of those days, you know? What you been up to? Man's lying. Oh, yeah, I know. It's one of those days. This is what I call situational morality. When the situation around us dictates our behavior and our actions. When doing the right thing really depends on where we are or who we are around. Because the reason I say that we all have the potential to become con artists is because at the base of a con artistry, if you will, or a scam or a Ponzi scheme, which very interestingly, did you know that Ponzi scheme took its name from someone with the last name Ponzi, which was an Italian mafia back in New York, which did some some scams through the mail. Interesting. I had no idea, but there you go. Ponzi scheme. You can look it up and read the story. The reason we all have potential of that is because at the base of everything is lies. And apparently, people lie about like 2 times a day, at least, which that's surprising. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you're going to become a con artist one day, because it takes more than that. But we all kind of have that part in common. I mean, I've lied in the past. But here's the thing that's so interesting, is a lot of our culture has gotten okay with situational morality. That, well, it depends. I remember seeing an interview of someone asking like, hey, if I offered you $1 million right now to rob a bank, would you? They're like, no way, no, $1 million. Oh, well, actually, that's a lot of money. How about 5 million, like 7 million cash at this moment? People thought about it like twice, which is very interesting. Because in today's episode, I want to encourage you to take your integrity to the next freaking level. One where it doesn't get corrupted or corroded like metal does with rust. Then maybe it's a little bit, but that rust, it can eventually start spreading. But if it doesn't, it already corrupts the metal. It makes the metal weaker. And that's what I don't want for your integrity. I don't want for your character. In Psalm 15, David writes something interesting. He writes this. He asks, who may worship in the sanctuary of the Lord? Who may enter your presence on your holy hill? Those who lead blameless lives and do what is right, speaking the truth from sincere hearts. Those who refuse to gossip or harm their neighbors or speak evil of their friends. Those who despise flagrant sinners and honor the faithful followers of the Lord and keep their promises even when it hurts. Those who lend money without charging interest. And listen to this. Those who cannot be bribed to lie about the innocent. Such people will stand forever. So here David writes of people who will stand forever, people of integrity. And sometimes in our culture of situational morality, we forget what it means to have integrity. We forget what it means to have a character that is whole and complete. Well, I want to go through each of these one by one and see how they apply practically. Because if we say that Jesus is the Lord of our lives and the Savior of our lives, then our actions and behaviors should reflect that statement. There is a higher standard that God is calling us to. There's a higher standard than what the world sets as a standard. Because let's be honest, the culture standard is so low that we often think that doing a little bit better than culture is good enough. So we might not be a pathological liar, but hey, maybe I'll lie about 2 times a day. But they're little ones. It doesn't really matter. That maybe I'll lie to get myself ahead. My friend, God is calling you higher than that. We can't settle for what culture is telling us is a standard, because the psalm starts with 2 questions. Who may worship in your sanctuary, Lord? Who may enter your presence on your holy hill? We know that the answer to that is only those who are perfect, because David actually expands on this in Psalm 24. We don't meet this requirement. And this is why I'm so thankful for the grace of God that gives me the power to live a righteous life because of what Jesus did for us. So everything that I'm going to talk about, how we have to live rightfully, is not like, well, are you telling that my salvation is based on that? Look, we've already been through that, okay? We are created for good works. We are a reflection of God's image here on earth. So yes, we are to be known by our fruits. And by yes, I don't mean our salvation is connected to us. Yes, we should do good works like what we're going to be talking about today. In Psalm 15, then David sets the context for what he's about to write. Because the question is not, how can man be a better person or a better human being? What David is actually writing is not a motivational speech, but he's setting our perspective on God first. Because, my friends, God is the motivation of why we live rightfully. He's my motivation of why I live with integrity. Not the society around me. Culture might reward me for good behavior, but not always. Sometimes it's going to cost you to do the right thing. And if you don't have the right motivation, you won't have perseverance in doing the right thing. If God is not your motivation for living rightfully, then you don't fear God correctly. Our culture is void of the fear of God. And And in turn, we have then become our own false gods because there's always that throne in your heart, always must have someone sitting on it. It's either will be the right person or the wrong person, and it's only meant for God. But when we don't have the fear of God, we then sit on that throne of our hearts. And when the Bible speaks of the fear of God, we have to understand that it's not a fear about being frightened necessarily of God. Instead, it is reverential fear, one where you recognize He's God and I'm not. Culture's not God. Thus, it does not dictate how I should live. So David writes in verse 2, those who lead blameless lives and do what is right, speaking truth from sincere hearts. Let's be honest, none of us can live a blameless life. None of us are perfect, and we know this. But knowing this is not an excuse for poor behavior and choices and just saying, oh, well, I'm not perfect. Come on, bro. Like, we can do better than that. Because elsewhere in the Bible, it says that we should live above reproach. And by the way, that's in the New Testament. That's not just in the Old Testament, because you're like, well, living blameless, that's an Old Testament covenant requirement. Now we have the grace of Jesus. Okay, you're like half right. We do have the grace of Jesus because we're not perfect, and that's in terms of our salvation. But in the New Testament, it says that we should live above reproach. So how we live still matters. As I heard a pastor say, we should live 1,000 feet above reproach. My question to you is, do you live your life that when something wrong happens, the blame can't be put on you? Because that's what it means to be blameless, is that you live in such a way that the wrong thing that happens can't be blamed on you because you don't live on the line. You don't hang around the wrong crowd, so when they get in trouble, you're nowhere to be blamed because you ain't there. You are blameless. It says that someone who does what is right. What does that mean? A lot of us take a middle ground. We don't do what is wrong, but we just take kind of like a middle ground, and we're like, well, I don't really necessarily do things that are wrong, but also doing the right thing and taking an initiative and a step forward sometimes is not the popular thing. My question is, have you heard about James chapter 4, verse 17? This is intense, and I'm just leave it out here because it's been very convicting to me. This is what it says. James 4:17 says, remember, it is sin to know what you ought to do and then not do it. So merely not doing the wrong thing, what God is saying, no, I'm calling you actually one step further, and I want you to do the right thing as well. So we'll just leave that part at that. Verse 3 says this, those who refuse to gossip or harm their neighbors or speak evil of their friends. I love how God is so practical. If you're asking yourself, how does God want me to live? His answer, stop gossiping. Wait, God, nah, bro. Like, God doesn't actually care about my gossiping, right? Yeah, he does. Verse 3, Psalm 15, it commends those who refuse to gossip or harm their neighbors or speak evil of their friends. Notice how it says refuse. You know why it says that? Because gossiping comes so naturally to us. I mean, that tea always be good. Like even coffee drinkers, you like some tea from time to time. You know what tea I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of y'all be in tea parties too often. What the Bible says is you have to make an intentional decision not to drink that tea, not to visit tea parties, not to gossip. It doesn't say that those who try not to gossip. No, it's well under your control. Yep, it's within your control in order to not gossip. It's not situational. So you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what happened. All of a sudden we started gossiping and I got carried away. No, it's your decision. In the Christian world, it's funny because we also gossip a lot, but we do it in the Christian way, right? Because we don't gossip. We just talk about prayer requests. Like, hey guys, can we just be praying for Joey? I don't know if you've heard about this. Here it comes, right? But he recently got fired. Oh, no way. Did he just get fired? Yeah, he got fired. And, well, I heard that he wasn't doing a good job and he was always late. I know, Joey's always late, isn't he? It's so true. He always is late. Remember that one time? And all of a sudden, a prayer request became a tea party, right? That's the thing. Is God says that it doesn't matter how good the tea is, refuse it. If it's important, talk to the person directly, not behind their back. In the same sentence, in Psalm 15, verse 3, God places gossiping in the same level as those who harm their neighbors or speak evil of their friends. This is no coincidence. Gossiping about someone is harming that someone. There's no gossip that is innocent. That is a powerful thing that God so just practically just gives us. So let's jump to verse 4. Verse 4 says, "Those who despise flagrant sinners honor the faithful followers of the Lord and keep their promises even when it hurts." This is a very strong word. Wait, whoa. That God is telling us to despise someone. I think Ephesians chapter 5 brings some clarity on this when Paul talks about living in the light. This is what he says. I'm going to, starting in verse 3, I believe. This is what he writes, quote, "But there must be no sexual sin among you or any kind of evil or greed. Those things are not right for God's holy people. Also, there must be no evil talk among you. You must not speak foolishly or tell evil jokes. These things are not right for you. Instead, you should be giving thanks to God. You can be sure of this. No one will have a place in the kingdom of God, in the kingdom of Christ and of God, who sins sexually or does evil things or is greedy. Anyone who is greedy is serving a false god." So he's talking about a lot of strong things right here. And then he says, "Do not let anyone fool you by telling you things that are not true, because these things will bring God's anger on those who do not obey them. So," listen to this, "so have nothing to do with them." Again, none of us are perfect, yet the word tells us not to hang out or build a relationship with people who flagrantly sin. That word flagrantly is something that is considered wrong or immoral and conspicuously or obviously wrong. So it's not like, well, someone who maybe unknowingly did something wrong and they're like, "Dude, I'm so sorry. I repent and I want to walk towards someone," and someone who's in the process and growing towards Christ. It's obviously not talking about those people. It's talking about the people who the book of Proverbs calls the foolish ones, the evildoers, those who just plan evil in their hearts. Those people exist, and a lot of us, we be hanging around with them. Don't go live in the mountain, but that doesn't mean that you got to go hang around with those guys. Like, you shouldn't be fooling with everybody, okay? Honestly, you should be fooling with nobody, okay? You should be ready, and I say this so just with, hopefully with encouragement. God is so practical. He wants the very best for your life. He understands us more than we understand ourselves. He understands how weak we are and how susceptible we are to peer pressure. And he says, guys, don't have anything to do with people that are completely in darkness and love those things. Cut them off. Might sound strong, but that doesn't mean that, hey, if that might be someone in your work, yeah, you don't hang out with them. Doesn't mean you don't work a shift with them. It's work, okay? We're in the world. But if they're like, hey, let's go hang out afterwards, don't. Just be like, nah, deuces. And if you're thinking, well, I don't have anyone else to hang out with, that problem is also solvable. Get connected with a community in your church. Again, none of us are perfect at this. The word tells us very clearly to keep away. Don't fool with those people. And here in Psalm 15, verse 4, tells us that God blesses those who keep their promises even when it hurts. I don't know if you heard that part in verse 4. Your word has to be your bond. That might require some of us to hold our words back a little more often. Someone like yours truly right here that speaks a lot. The Bible's like, yeah, I want you to be more accountable about the words that you say, because God keeps promises very, very seriously. The New Testament echoes this when God himself, right, Jesus, in Matthew 5:37 says, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no, for whatever more than this is from the evil one." Look, man, that's Jesus. I ain't going to try to explain him. What he said is what he said, bro. So let your yes be yes and your no be no, even when it hurts, because culture won't necessarily reward you for keeping your promises sometimes, because if your morals are based on external circumstances rather than internal convictions, you will be like a wave tossed by the wind, which God talks about in the New Testament, not very favorably of. I'll just put it that way. And finally, the last verses of this psalm brings us back to our original question about how much money it takes to bribe someone in order for them to lie. It's what verse 5 says. "Those who lend money without charging interest and who cannot be bribed to lie about the innocent. Such people will stand forever. Can I ask you an honest question? Can you be bribed to lie? Okay, you're like, no, dude, of course not. $5? No. $10? No, come on, no, bro, nah. $1,000? $2,000? $20,000? Because if it's 1,000 or 20,000, if a million would do it, but $1 wouldn't, that doesn't show me how strong integrity is. That actually shows me how weak integrity is. Because again, that shows me that our morals are based on external circumstances rather than internal convictions. I've seen these TikToks, right, where it says, like, what would you do for $1 million? It lists like different challenges and what would you do? I guess my question would be, maybe this is something that you have to sit with and think about, because I've asked myself, would you do the wrong thing for the right price? Maybe you say you wouldn't, but many would. A study found that 78% of job seekers lied during the hiring process. Uh-oh. Yeah, it's true, though. Would you do the wrong thing for the right price? See, my friend, I want to help you strengthen your integrity. I want to help us strengthen our integrity by changing our motivation. My motivation of doing what is right is not dependent if there is a reward for it necessarily. Because, hey, a lot of times the world will reward you for bad behavior. And although what's so amazing about God, because he's a good father, he rewards you for the good actions that you do. But that's not your motivation for them. My motivation of doing what is right is not based on how culture responds or what reward I will get. It is based on honoring my Father in heaven, to live a life that pleases him. Because remember, the devil is the father of lies. I don't want to harbor his children in any area of my life. Ooh, that sounded a bit deep, but I hope that that hits. So here's the question: how much money would it take to bribe you to lie? I hope the answer is 0. We'll see you in the next episode of The Andrew Ramon Show.